I'm Allendale's chief meteorologist Ryan Martin with a look at your midday weather update. As we take a look at the latest surface analysis across the country, there's not much change from earlier in the day today, and we feel fairly confident in our thoughts about the forecast pattern coming up, not just here domestically, but also across key areas of the world. Let's start with the domestic thoughts here this afternoon, looking at a definite dry day today. Keep an eye on weak low pressure that is now drifting toward the St. Louis area. Some analysts are drawing a cool front from that low back to one in central to west central Oklahoma. I think it's semantics right now, but we're going to have to watch this closely. I think there may be just enough of a push here that these lows come together and then try and work east-northeast, tying in with a weak, stagnant, old frontal boundary that still is kind of draped across Ohio and into Indiana. We mention that because we look for this to probably develop a minor amount of precipitation, looking mostly at kind of hit and miss, sprinkle, spit action, a few hundredths to no more than a tenth, and it looks like it's going to be mostly over extreme eastern parts of Illinois into central Indiana and Ohio. Don't want to talk this up too much because I just think the moisture availability is not there. This little system, this little front as it works through is actually going to do better at ushering in a major push of cool Canadian air. The Canadian air mass that comes in is dry. You can see the high-pressure dome. One part of the dome is over Nebraska, but the main body of the high is still back over southeastern parts of British Columbia. There's no moisture in this high-pressure dome as it sits. It's a dry air mass. So we're going to replace one dry air mass with another. How do you wring moisture out of a switch from one dry to the next, even if the temperature change is 20 degrees, 10 degrees, 30 degrees? It doesn't matter. There's not much there to wring out. So that's the reason why I continue to think this is a non-issue, but the cool air that comes in behind it this weekend probably is. I still think we can see some patchy frost across parts of the Corn Belt as we go through this weekend, but the areas that have the best chance of seeing it are also the ones that are either at or already past normal first frost dates, so it's not a big issue. What really I think will become a bigger issue is the strength of the high itself, okay? So that goes beyond just how cold the temperatures are this weekend, but it goes into what happens as the high moves away next week. As we move through Monday and Tuesday, we show the high moving across the eastern part of the country. Very strong south and southwest winds come up the backside of that high. That shows you how strong it is, and that'll be key. Because if we pick up some very strong winds, bring some much warmer air in, and allow it to interact with the atmosphere all across the Corn Belt ahead of our next front that admittedly is going to be here midweek next week, all of a sudden you really have to look at the precipitation out of that front and say, what's it going to do? Right now we're staying conservative, saying probably 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch. We did stress this morning on our web write-up that is the low end. But if these strong winds really interact, if we get a big push of temperatures, which I think we can, all of a sudden you might be able to throw a little bit more moisture in there. Some models, the European especially, going gangbusters with 2 inches of rain in south central parts of Illinois. We're not going to go there yet, but we can definitely see this south wind flow being key, especially if it's able to pull any moisture off the Gulf, which I think it definitely could. Behind that front then next week, as we move into the Friday, Saturday time frame, we're going to be looking at cooler air coming back, a mostly dry pattern then for the extended period. We had been watching a system up around the British Columbia coast saying maybe that could get in around the 27th, 28th, or later. That system's not nearly as strong right now, so we're going to scale that back just a little bit. International weather, getting a little more interesting. Let's talk about where rain actually has increased its chances a bit, and that would be in Ukraine, former Soviet Union areas. There's a nice system that moves across Ukraine now. It looks like from Sunday mid to late afternoon right on through Monday. Rains are not spectacular. I mean, let's call them what they are, 1/4 to maybe 3/4, 8/10 of an inch, a coverage of about 60%. So could they be better? Sure. But in an area that's been so dry, these are probably the best rain chances that the region's seen in the past 30 days. What I will say is this. It's mostly a Ukraine event, pushing these rains farther east into the central region, Volga region, southern region of Russia. Yeah, they kind of fall apart. We'll see another weak front in western Ukraine late next week. Minor rain totals right now, a few hundredths of an inch, but the front looks strong, going all the way north into parts of Eastern Europe, so it could pick up a little bit more moisture. It's also interesting to note the temperatures are going to be below normal in this part of the world. International weather, Brazil for soybeans. Yeah, that place is looking dry, mostly dry in almost all Brazil areas over the next 10 days, even southern Brazil, which has been the wet spot up to here recently. Less geographical coverage of rains there. Mostly Rio Grande do Sul south through Uruguay. So not nearly as much moisture around. Temperatures above normal. You go farther south into Argentina, though. Argentina grain areas get two nice systems over the course of the next week to week and a half. Probably combining the two, you're looking at 1/2 to 1.5 inch rainfalls with 60 to 80% coverage. So a nice little batch of rain there in Argentina. Australia still looks mostly dry, although there are a few scattered showers popping up over the next week. New South Wales, Victoria. In terms of actual wheat production, though, quarter to maybe 20% or less of the entire wheat belt. That's the way things are stacking up here at Midday. If you've got any questions on the weather, give us a call at Allendale. I'm Chief Meteorologist Ryan Martin.